The sky was the color of old bruises. A pressure bloom opened above the cracked highway, soundless at first. Then the air folded in on itself with a concussive thrum. Twisted cars rattled where they lay, half sunk in ash. Loose bolts hopped in place. A bent guardrail sang a thin, quavering note as if someone had plucked it with an invisible finger. The metal felt him before the ground did. He arrived standing, boots pressed into gravel that had once been asphalt. Heat bled from the rupture behind him and died in seconds, leaving a smell like burned wires and rain that never came. He drew one breath. Dust scraped his throat. Radiation ticked faintly against his skin, a prickle like static crawling over a wool coat. All around him, wreckage. A line of cars fused into each other nose to tail. Their frames melted into a single long skeleton. The nearest still wore a door painted with a smiling cartoon man giving a thumbs up. The paint had blistered into scales. Wind passed through the hollow shells and found the rebar ribs of a collapsed billboard. The rebar answered with a low, ongoing chime. He tilted his head, listening. The world hummed to him. Not sound exactly, more like the idea of sound, carried through metal. The tremor in the highway's buried pipes. The distant pulse of a generator far to the west. The restless whisper of scrap shifting in 1,000 tiny movements. "So," he said, voice steady, thick with accent, "this is where the dead learn to breathe again." A tumbleweed of tangled wires rolled across the road and snagged on his boot. He nudged it aside. The wires, stuck for a moment, tugged toward him as if curious, then fell away when he relaxed the field around his body. He took one step forward. The highway answered with a long, complaining groan. A shape bobbed into view over the hood of a rusted bus, round, steel, on a single thrumming jet. A battered Mr. Handy robot, one eye lens cracked, paint scoured to primer. Its saw arm had been replaced with a dented kitchen knife taped to the mount. Oh my," the robot chirped, thrusters coughing. "A living human. Sir, you appear to be glowing. Is that a medical condition or a lifestyle choice?" He looked at it. The robot's chassis vibrated, sympathetic, as if his presence tuned it. "What is this place?" he asked. "Sanctuary Hills," the robot said brightly, "or what's left of it. I'm Codsworth. I maintain the grounds, the hedges, and, oh dear, where did the hedges go?" Codsworth rotated, scanning the horizon with a whirring sound. The horizon gave him nothing back but broken houses and a church with its steeple snapped up like a tooth. "The air stinks of poison," he said, "and fear." "Radiation, sir," Codsworth replied. "Very popular these days. Goes with everything." From the culvert under the road came the shuffle of feet and the scrape of something metal dragged over stone. 3 figures climbed out. Leather scraps, tire armor, faces hidden behind goggles clouded with dust. One carried a pipe pistol. Another had a machete with teeth filed into the blade. The third dragged a shopping cart full of cans and a baby doll with no eyes. "Hey!" one of them shouted. "Shiny coat! Drop what you got!" He did not turn. The rebar in the billboard behind him lifted a centimeter off its bolts. "I have nothing," he said, "except a lesson you will not enjoy." The raider with the pistol laughed. The laugh broke into a cough. He raised the gun. The trigger squealed. The pistol leaped out of his hand. It did not fly. It folded. The barrel curled inward like a flower closing at dusk. Springs twisted. Screws unwound themselves and zipped back into the air. The weapon fell apart in a rain of small, polite pieces. All 3 raiders froze. The wind threaded the ribs of the bus and played a long note. "Please," Codsworth whispered, jet sputtering. "No more shooting near the hydrangeas." He finally turned. "You live in a cemetery of steel," he told them, "and you think yourselves kings because you learned to gnaw the bones." The shopping cart shuddered. Its wheels crept toward him, leaving twin lines in the dust. The machete lifted from its owner's hand and hung there, vibrating, unsure whether to be weapon or scrap. One raider bolted. The other 2 dropped to their knees, hands up, goggles tilted down. "Please," one said, "we didn't know you were like that." "Like what?" he asked. "Like a storm." He considered the word. He let the machete fall. It struck the road and rang. "Go," he said. Tell the others what lives in their tools now." They ran. Their footsteps faded into the hush of wind and metal song. Codsworth hovered closer, eye lens whirring. "Sir, that was decisive. May I ask what you intend to do?" He looked down the highway where the pipes under the earth carried a faint, stubborn pulse. Somewhere a generator argued with the night. Somewhere else an antenna tried to remember what it was for. "I intend to teach this place to listen," he said. A shadow crossed the road. Wide wings, leathery, with a ragged edge. A radroach burst from the ditch and skittered toward him, shell clicking. He did not glance at it. The street sign above him, "Welcome to Sanctuary," peeled itself free and drifted down. The radroach veered, struck the sign, and tumbled back into the ditch, legs ticking in complaint. Codsworth gasped. "Oh my, you reorganized things." He walked. Each step drew whispers from buried wires and the rebar bones of houses. Light caught on his helmet and broke into dull gold against the gray. A mailbox leaned toward him, magnetized by habit. He pushed it aside with 2 fingers. At the end of the road, a church bell lay in the weeds, cracked. He paused and touched it with the edge of his mind. The bell answered with a tired, honest note. It carried over the houses, over Codsworth's gentle whir, over the far-off cough of a mutant's call. "Listen," he told the town, "I am not your god. I am your warning." The wind took the note and threaded it through every bent nail and torn fence. The metal sang back, a chorus of small, precise sounds. The first shot cracked the air like a split bone. It came from the shell of a diner whose roof had slid into its own booths. The sound skidded across the highway and struck the bus carcass with a dull thunk. Dust shook loose from the ceiling of a nearby house and fell in a thin curtain. He stopped walking. The metal around him twitched, uncertain. Somewhere to his left, a sheet of tin peeled itself off a porch and clattered across the yard. The wind lifted, pushed through a thicket of bent nails and loose siding, and found the rebar in a half-fallen wall. The rebar answered with a long, thin scream as it bent against itself. "Screech," he murmured. They announced themselves with broken music. Codsworth bobbed at his shoulder, saw arm rotating nervously. "Oh dear. Hostile presence detected. Again. I do try to keep them off the lawn, sir." A figure burst from behind a rusted Nuka-Cola sign, coat flapping, red scarf snapping against her throat. She slid into cover behind a mailbox that had lost its door. A reporter's hat, miraculously intact, dipped low over her eyes. "Hey, metal guy," she shouted. "You draw raiders like flies to sugar bombs." Another voice boomed from farther down the street, heavy and disciplined. "Contact confirmed. Unknown hostile group approaching from east." A man in bulky power armor stepped into view, rifle raised but not firing. The armor's joints whined as he moved, the sound carrying even over the wind. "Name's Paladin Danse, Brotherhood of Steel. Identify yourself." He did not look at Danse. He felt him, felt the weight of the armor, the tension in its bolts, the small electric nerves of its servos. "Your armor is loud," he said. "It cannot keep secrets." Danse stiffened. "That's not an answer." Another shot. This one clipped the road at his feet and spat gravel. A raider whooped from the diner roof. Others poured out from between houses, leather, tires, bone charms clacking against their chests. One dragged a shopping cart shielded with license plates. Another carried a minigun whose barrel sagged like a tired jaw. Piper popped up from behind the mailbox long enough to fire twice, then ducked as return fire chewed splinters out of the porch behind her. "If you've got a trick," she yelled, "now's a great time to use it." The minigun spun. The sound was not a roar yet, just the throat-clearing rattle of a thing about to speak. Danse fired, disciplined burst that sparked off the cart shield. Codsworth squealed and zipped behind a hedge stump. He raised one hand. The street sign, Main Street, tore free of its post with a noise like a scream being folded in half. The sign twisted as it flew, its edges curling inward, and slammed into the minigun. The barrel bent sideways with a shriek of tortured steel. The weapon coughed once, then died in a rain of cartridges. The raider carrying it fell to his knees, hands over his ears. The wind rushed through the sudden gap in gunfire and found a pile of scrap in a yard. Hubcaps, bed springs, a refrigerator door. The bed springs snapped together, coils biting coils. The refrigerator door peeled off its hinges and skated across the grass, wobbling like a drunk shield. "Stand down," he said, voice level. "Your tools have already chosen." "Holy hell," Piper breathed. "Did you see that?" From the side street came a bellow that shook at the porch railings. A super mutant stomped into view, skin like old rope, a sledgehammer slung over one shoulder. "Little metal man think he boss?" the mutant roared. "Strong smash boss!" Strong charged. The hammer rose. The refrigerator door met it mid-swing. The impact rang like a church bell struck with a bat. The door bowed but did not break. The hammer stuck to it, shuddering, its handle trembling as if it wanted to be somewhere else. Strong snarled and yanked. The hammer slid an inch, two, then leaped out of his grip and slammed against the door again, flattening itself in the process. Strong stared at his empty hands. "Strong hate magnets," he muttered. Bullets stitched the road around his boots. He did not move. He felt the nails in the houses lean toward him, felt the loose screws in Dance's armor quiver like insects. He did not take them. He let them feel him. A raider vaulted a fence and rushed him with a machete made from a saw blade. The blade shrieked as it bent, teeth folding into a useless curve. The raider tripped over his own feet and skidded into the dust, crying out. "Power is not your enemy," he told them. "Ignorance is." Danse lowered his rifle a fraction. "What are you?" He glanced at the Brotherhood insignia on the chest plate. "A student of history," he said, "and history repeats itself when men worship their weapons." Piper popped up again, firing at a raider who had climbed the diner roof. "Less philosophy, more helping!" He flicked his wrist. The diner's metal awning peeled away with a noise like 1,000 forks dragged across plates. It wrapped around the raider's legs and pinned him to the roof. The raider howled, trapped, boots kicking against the tin. The shopping cart's shield lurched forward, its license plates rattling like teeth. He reached into it and felt the screws loosen, the plates slide. The cart collapsed into a flat, useless sprawl. The raider behind it froze, hands still holding the ghost of a handle. Codsworth peeked out from his hedge stump. "Oh my, you're tidying!" A last raider fired wildly and bolted toward the church. Danse tracked him, but did not shoot. Piper did. The raider fell, not dead, just sprawled, wind knocked out of him. He did not move again. The street filled with a new sound, the screech of steel snapping together. Springs biting, nails aligning. The wind threaded it all into one long metallic wail. Strong squinted at his flattened hammer, then at the man. "You make toys angry," he said. "I make them honest," he replied. Danse stepped closer, boots thudding. "You just changed the balance of power in this area." He looked past Danse, down the road where smoke rose from the diner, and the houses leaned together like tired men. "No," he said. "I revealed it." Piper dusted her coat and came over, eyes bright. "So, Mystery Metal Messiah, you sticking around? Because the Commonwealth could use fewer lunatics with guns and more, whatever that was." He listened. The pipes under the road still pulsed. Far away, a radio crackled. The metal kept singing, softer now, like a throat clearing after a shout. "I will stay," he said, "until this place learns a different song." Ash drifted through the camp like gray snow that had forgotten how to be cold. It settled on everything, on the tarps stretched between telephone poles, on the dented cooking pots, on the hair of the woman stirring something that smelled like boiled corn and rust. Every footstep lifted it again, a soft, whispering cloud that caught the light from a barrel fire and turned briefly silver before sinking back down. He stood at the edge of the settlement and let the ash touch his boots. It left pale fingerprints on the leather. Ozone rode the air beneath the smoke, sharp and electrical, like a storm that never arrived. It prickled at the inside of his nose. The metal listened with him, the tin walls of shacks, the bent traffic signs hammered into roofs, the wire fences stitched together with hangers and hope. Codsworth hovered close, thrusters stirring the ash into small spirals. "Do mind the cooking area, sir. They're rather sensitive about hygiene. Not that I blame them. Everything here tastes faintly of dirt." Piper was already there, perched on an overturned filing cabinet, scribbling in her notebook. She looked up when he approached. You just stroll into a refugee camp like you own the road. I own nothing, he said, but the road is loud. A boy no older than 12 peered at him from behind a crate of Nuka-Cola bottles. His eyes glowed faintly green in the firelight. The boy scratched at his arm, leaving a pale line in skin that did not heal. A woman stepped forward. Her hair had gone white in streaks that did not belong to age. You the one who bent the diner in half? He nodded once. She let out a dry laugh that became a cough. Figures. Everything strange comes out of the dust now. From the far side of camp, Boots approached with a steady and armored rhythm. Paladin Danse emerged between two shacks, helmet tucked under his arm. His face looked tired in the firelight, jaw shadowed, eyes always measuring. We intercepted a raider transmission, Danse said. They're spreading your description. Man who makes guns cry. He tilted his head slightly. An exaggeration. Guns cannot cry. They can only fail. Strong lumbered in behind Danse, carrying a sack that leaked something dark. Strong bring meat, he announced. Meat from thing with too many legs. He dropped the sack. A rad scorpion tail slid halfway out, twitching once before going still. Several settlers backed away. The woman who'd spoken first folded her arms. We don't have room for war, she said, or gods. I am neither, he replied, but this place is sick. A murmur passed through the camp. The boy with glowing eyes coughed. Radiation, Piper said quietly. It's everywhere. Soil, water, people. You breathe it, you eat it, you become it. He knelt and pressed his palm to a sheet of corrugated metal that served as a table. It was warm, buzzing faintly with scavenged current. Beneath that, he felt the slow tick of Geiger counters hidden in pockets and belts. Tiny hearts counting down something no one could see. You live inside a wound, he said, and you pretend it is weather. The woman bristled. We pretend nothing. We survive. Danse crossed his arms. This area used to be within evacuation range. Vaults failed. People adapted. Adaptation is not healing, he said. A child tripped and scraped her knee on a nail jutting from a plank. The nail trembled as if embarrassed. He lifted 2 fingers. The nail eased back into the wood, leaving a neat, clean hole. The girl stared, unblinking. You fix things, she whispered. I correct them, he said. Strong squatted by the fire and poked the coals with a stick. Fire good. Metal man good too. Make smashed toys behave. The boy with glowing eyes stepped closer. Can you fix me? The question landed heavier than the ash. He felt the screws in nearby walls tighten, as if bracing. I can move what is metal, he said gently. I cannot command what is inside you. The boy nodded as if he had expected that. He wiped his nose on his sleeve and went back to the bottles. Piper closed her notebook. You talk like a preacher, but you bend the world like a mechanic. Both repair broken things, he said. One lies about the cost. A man with a bandaged face approached, carrying a cracked radio. It stopped working after the storm last week. Makes a noise like teeth grinding. He took the radio. It vibrated in his hands, a tiny panic. He teased the bent antenna straight. Inside, a loose coil aligned itself. The radio clicked and a woman's voice poured out, distant and thin, singing about a place with clean water and no ash. The camp went still. Ozone sharpened in the air as the current steadied. The ash settled. Danse exhaled slowly. You could destabilize everything if you stay. Everything is already unstable, he said. I simply make the cracks visible. The woman who'd spoken first watched the radio as if it might dissolve. If raiders come again? They will, Piper said. What then? The woman finished. He stood. The firelight caught on his helmet and threw his shadow long across the camp, broken by tent poles and hanging cans. Then they will learn, he said, that metal remembers who treats it as a tool and who treats it as a god. A gust of wind swept through, lifting ash in a slow veil. The wire fence sang softly. The radio's song wavered but held. Strong nodded, satisfied. Metal man stay, strong like camp with singing walls. Danse looked away toward the dark road. Piper watched him like she was already writing the headline. He listened, to the counters ticking, to the pipes buried under the ground, to the far-off hum of something old and patient. The ozone lingered on his tongue. This world burned itself, he said quietly. Now it must decide what it will become. The hill rose from the outskirts of the settlement like a spine breaking through skin. At its crown, a satellite dish leaned toward the clouds. Ribs exposed where panels had been stripped for scrap. Cables spilled from its base in black coils, half buried in chalky dirt. Wind slid through them and drew out a voice. Not quite a sound, more a continuous whisper made of static and breath. He climbed without hurry. Each step nudged loose pebbles that clicked against old copper lines. The cables shuddered as he passed, the insulation dry and flaking under the sun. Ozone clung to them, sharp and thin, as if the sky had once tried to bite them and failed. Codsworth puffed along behind him, jet coughing. I do hope this was worth the hike, sir. My servos were never designed for hills. Flat suburbia, that was the plan. Below them, the camp looked like a scatter of dark stitches in pale cloth. Smoke lifted in lazy columns. Somewhere a radio still sang. At the top, the dish loomed, its surface dimpled and scarred. Birds had nested in its frame once. Their bones still lined one groove. The wind pressed through the tangle of cables, and the whisper rose, a dry electrical murmur that skated along his skin. He closed his eyes. The dish answered, not with images, with pulses, faint currents moving through metal that no longer knew its purpose. He felt the signal path the way one might feel an old road under new weeds. Beneath the hill, conduits still ran. Beyond it, towers stood with their teeth broken, but their throats open. So many mouths, he said softly, still waiting to speak. Boots crunched behind him. Piper reached the crest and bent over with her hands on her knees. You picked the cheeriest places. Danse followed, slower, armor joints protesting. Strong came last, grumbling about rocks. Why here? Danse asked. He knelt and brushed dirt from a bundle of cables. They were warm, buzzing faintly, like nerves that remembered pain. Because the past left its bones, he said, and bones can still carry weight. He touched the dish. The whisper sharpened into a thin hiss. The cables quivered. Somewhere far away, a relay tower woke and forgot itself again. He drew the signal toward him, gentle at first, coaxing it along the old path. The dish tilted, metal crying as rust protested movement. Static spilled out of the speaker box bolted to the frame. Then a fragment of a voice. Priority! Evacuation! It cut off, returned, cut off again. Piper straightened. That's pre-war. Danse stepped closer, rifle slung low. Military channel. Strong squinted at the dish. Talking plate. The wind threaded it through the cables and made them murmur. He guided the loose ends together. The insulation peeled back in soft flakes. Copper met copper. The whisper grew steadier, a low, restless susurration. A new voice bled through, thin, female, carrying the echo of rooms that no longer existed. Vault-Tec emergency broadcast? The words staggered, then held. Piper's pen scratched in her notebook without her looking. Codsworth hovered nearer, eye lens wide. You see, he said, it wants to be heard. Below them, something moved at the foot of the hill, figures, small and careful. Raiders with rifles slung, watching the crest. The metal in their guns twitched at the edge of his awareness, like animals testing a fence. Danse noticed them and shifted his stance. We've got company. I know, he said. They heard the whisper too. He drew more of the signal up through the cables. The dish shuddered, then steadied, angled toward a sky bruised with clouds. The static thickened, a grainy breath between words. Radiation levels, the voice said. Enas are not safe. The raiders below began to climb, boots slipping in dust. One raised binoculars. Strong picked up a loose hubcap and held it like a shield. Strong smash if they come. Wait, he said. The cables along the ground twitched and slid closer to him, snakes remembering their old dance. The raiders reached the halfway point. He spoke without turning. You hear ghosts and think they are prizes. Go. One of them laughed and kept climbing. He lifted his hand. The dish did not move. The cables did. They tightened, drawing together with a low, steady scrape. The wind rushed through them, and the whisper deepened into a hiss that filled the hilltop. A length of cable lashed out and wrapped around a raider's ankle, not hard enough to break skin, just enough to pull him off balance. He fell and rolled, shouting. The others froze. Your weapons are tired, he called it down. Let them rest. A rifle slid out of one man's hands and down the slope, bumping against rocks. It stopped at the foot of the hill and lay still. They backed away, slowly, eyes never leaving the dish. The broadcast steadied. If you can hear this, shelter is... The words dissolved into static, then returned. He kept the path open, coaxing current through scars in the line. The dish hummed, a low, contented sound. Piper looked at him. You just made a lighthouse out of junk. A lighthouse is only a mirror, he said. It does not choose who sails. Danse studied the horizon. You're lighting up every signal in the area. Yes, that will draw attention. Good, he said. Let them come. Let them listen. Strong poked a cable with one thick finger. It buzzed and he jerked his hand back. Talking plate bite. Codsworth drifted closer to the speaker box. It's rather nice, really, hearing something that remembers being useful. The whisper through the broken cables filled the hilltop, constant now, like breath through teeth. Below them, the campfires burned brighter as dusk crept in. The radio song from earlier rose faintly to meet the old broadcast. He stood with the dish's shadow crossing his boots. Machines do not forget, he said. They wait. This world taught them to wait in pieces. The wind pressed through the cables again. Static slid across metal and skin. Far off, another tower answered. A faint pulse in the dark. The hill began to speak. The bunker door had been welded shut with the kind of care reserved for coffins. 3 layers of scrap sealed it. Refrigerator panels, car hoods, and a slab of street sign hammered flat across the center. The welding beads looked like frozen worms, dull and cracked with age. Moisture clung to them in a thin metallic sweat. The air down here smelled of old batteries and stone that had forgotten sunlight. He pressed his palm to the door. Cold answered him. Not the chill of night, but the deep, patient cold of steel that had been underground longer than memory. It vibrated faintly against his skin, a shy pulse, like something holding its breath. Codsworth hovered beside him, jets stirring dust. Vault access doors are usually friendlier. This one seems rather offended. Because it was told to stop, he said, and never asked to start again. Piper crouched to inspect the seams. You sure this isn't a raider pantry? Oh. Danse stood a step back, rifle low but ready. This was a pre-war supply node. Brotherhood scouts marked it sealed but intact. Strong snorted. Strong smelled metal bones. He closed his eyes and listened past the rust, past the weld scars, into the hinge pins buried in concrete. The pins trembled when he touched them with thought. Bolts loosened their grip with tiny complaints. The welds peeled apart, not with force, but with surrender. Steel remembering that it had once been liquid. The door exhaled. Air rushed out of the dark beyond, stale and cold, carrying the smell of oil and dust and something faintly sweet that had once been plastic. Inside, a corridor sloped downward. Pipes lined the walls like ribs. Emergency lights flickered with the tired insistence of things that had been blinking alone for centuries. The floor rang under his boots, each step answering with a hollow note. The steel beneath his soles felt solid, obedient. It knew what it was for. This place still has a pulse, he said. Pulse is generous, Piper muttered, more like a twitch. They passed storage rooms stacked with crates stamped medical, ammo, rations. The letters had bled and blurred. A skeleton sat slumped against one crate, dog tags cold against bone. Strong poked it with a finger. Human leave skin behind. Dance's jaw tightened. Focus. They reached the control chamber. A bank of dead consoles faced a wall of dials. A generator squatted in the corner like a metal animal curled in on itself. Its casing was dented. A coil had slipped out of alignment, leaning like a broken tooth. He knelt beside it and laid his hand on the housing. Cold steel met warm glove. Inside, the generator murmured, not running, but remembering how. Fuel? Piper asked. Not yet, he said. First, it must remember its shape. He slid the coil back into place. Bolts tightened themselves with soft clicks. A fan blade straightened, wobbled, disappearing like a thought corrected mid-sentence. The smell of oil sharpened. The generator shuddered. Lights flared, then steadied. The bunker breathed. From the far hallway came a sound. Wet boots, slow and dragging. A ghoul lurched into the doorway, skin like cracked parchment, eyes pale and unfocused. It raised its head at the hum of power. "Light!" it croaked. "Still, light!" Strong lifted his sack of rad scorpion meat like a club. "Smash?" "No," he said. The ghoul shuffled forward, hands trembling. The cold steel of the railing steadied under its grip. "Been dark," it whispered. "So long dark." Danse stepped forward. "Sir, this area isn't safe." The ghoul looked at Dance's armor, then at him. "Metal Man brings sun?" "I bring machines back to their work," he said. "Light is a side effect." He turned it back to the console and coaxed the dials into alignment. One needle crept upward, slow and careful. A second followed. The bunker lights warmed from sickly yellow to something closer today. Piper exhaled. "You just resurrected a corpse." "A machine," he corrected. "Corpses do not answer." The ghoul slid down to sit on the floor, bathing its hands in the glow. "Knew someone would come," it murmured. From deeper in the bunker, metal scraped. The sound came from a security door that had jammed halfway open. Something pushed through, tall, angular, eyes glowing red behind cracked lenses. A protectron, its voice box warped. "Unauthorized. Presence detected. Oh." Its arm lifted, weapon barrel whining as it charged. Danse raised his rifle. "Hostile robot." The protectron fired. The shot went wide, punching a hole in a crate. Rations spilled out, powder and crumbs. He stepped between the machine and the others. "Stand down," he said. The robot's joints shrieked as they tried to move against his will. Its barrel sagged. The internal springs twanged and went slack. "Error," it stuttered. "Your duty is over," he told it. "Rest." The robot folded in on itself, servos winding down with a sound like a sigh. Strong grin. "Metal Man make other metal sleepy." Danse stared at the fallen protectron, then at the generator. "You've turned this place into a fortress." "A shelter," he said. "A spine for people who forgot they had one." The ghoul touched the warm wall and laughed, a sound like gravel rolling. "Bright bones." He leaned against the console and felt the cold steel under his fingers. Steady now, humming with purpose. The bunker no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a hell breath finally released. Outside, wind found the open door and slid down the corridor, carrying the distant whisper of cables singing on a hill. "This is where it begins," he said quietly. "Not with guns, with things that still know how to work." The generator kept its rhythm. The bunker listened. The factory district breathed like something wounded. Steam seeped from split pipes and pooled low over the concrete. A sour fog that smelled of wet iron and old chemicals. Conveyor belts lay in tangles, their rubber skins swollen and soft, slumping over rollers like tired tongues. Every step pressed moisture out of the ground with a muted squelch. The sound repeated itself in small echoes between the brick shells of buildings. Wet crunch. Not a word. A texture. He felt it through the soles of his boots before he saw what made it. A shape unfolded from behind a collapsed press. Too many joints, skin mottled and slick, as if it had never learned to dry. A mirelurk, its shell warped into bulbous ridges, legs churning through sludge that had once been coolant. Its claws sank into the floor and came up coated in black foam. Piper gagged behind him. "That thing crawled out of a dumpster and decided to hate us personally." Danse brought his rifle up. Movement on the east line. Multiple contacts. Strong rolled his shoulders. Strong smell swamp meat. Codsworth hovered higher, saw arm twitching. "I do believe this neighborhood has gone entirely feral." The ground shifted again. Two more shapes tore free of the fog, feral ghouls swollen by radiation, their skins slick and split, jaws working as if chewing the air. They ran with the sound of wet rags being wrung out. Wet crunch. Wet crunch. He closed his eyes. The factory answered him. Overhead, an iron crane sagged on its track. Its cable vibrated with the fear of movement. The nearest conveyor belt shuddered and dragged itself a foot closer, rubber skin peeling with a noise like soaked paper. "Do not rush," he said. "They are already tired." The Mirelurk lunged. Its claw scraped along a steel beam, leaving a trail of slime. He lifted his hand. The beam flexed inward, slow and precise, catching the creature at the hinge of its leg. The shell made a sound like crockery breaking underwater. The creature hit the floor and skidded, its body making that sound again as it turned. Wet crunch, softer this time. The ghouls followed, slipping where coolant and blood had mixed. Danse fired. The shots tore through one ghoul's shoulder and spun it sideways. It hit a crate and slid down, leaving a dark smear. "Eyes up!" Danse barked. A pipe burst somewhere above them. A sheet of warm liquid poured down, pattering on helmets and armor. It smelled of old oil and something sweet that should not have survived a century. Strong charged the ghoul and swung his sack of rad scorpion meat. The impact made a sound like someone dropping soaked laundry. The ghoul folded. Wet crunch. Piper fired and ducked as another ghoul leaped over a fallen press. It landed wrong, ankle bending where bone had learned to be rubber. It kept coming anyway, mouth working. He stepped forward and tapped the side of a rusted forklift with 2 fingers. The forks lifted, not fast, not dramatic, just enough to meet the ghoul's chest and pin it to the wall. The metal pressed in with patient pressure. The ghoul's limbs twitched, then stilled. "Machines," he said, "do not flinch." From the fog came a heavier sound. Not steps, drags. Something pulled itself over a mound of conveyor parts. A mutant dog, skin translucent and slick, ribs visible like wet ladder rungs. Its paws slapped the concrete and left prints that filled with dark water. Strong bared his teeth. "Ugly puppy!" The dog lunged at Danse. Danse fired, but the shot glanced off a metal drum and went wild. The dog's jaws snapped shut on the barrel of the rifle. The sound was wrong, teeth on steel, a grinding complaint. He moved without looking. The drum buckled inward. The rifle slid free. The dog tumbled, legs scrambling. It hit the floor and rolled, the sound returning. Wet crunch, then a softer, pleading slosh as it tried to stand. "Enough," he said. A chain lay half buried in muck near his boot. He lifted it. It coiled around the dog's torso, not tight, not cruel, just firm. The dog's growl turned into a low, confused whine. Codsworth dipped lower. "Should I clean that?" "Let it go," Piper said. "I'm not eating anything from this place ever again." More movement. 2 Mirelurks climbed over a broken vat, shells glistening. Their legs punched into the sludge and came up with strings of black foam stretching between floor and claw. Wet crunch. Wet crunch. He listened to the crane cable. It trembled like a held breath. "Down," he told it. The crane slid along its track and dipped its hook. The hook snagged one Mirelurk by the shell ridge and lifted it a foot off of the ground. The creature flailed, legs scraping the air with a sound like spoons in a sink. He swung the crane gently and set the Mirelurk down on its back. It kicked, shell ringing, then went still. The second Mirelurk reared. Piper shouted and fired. The shot went wide. He pulled the nearest sheet of corrugated steel up from a pile and tilted it. The Mirelurk hit it and slid, legs bicycling uselessly. The sheet bent around the curve of its shell. He pressed once, firm, wet crunch, muffled by metal. Silence returned in pieces. Steam drifted, coolant dripped from a pipe in slow, deliberate taps. The smell of iron thickened. Danse lowered his rifle. "Your presence is drawing these things in. Everything broken moves toward a louder noise," he said. "I am loud." Strong nudged the chained mutant dog with a boot. It whined and turned its head away. "Strong no smash. Strong board." Piper wiped her boots on a dry patch of concrete that did not deserve the name. "This place sounds like it's chewing itself." He looked around at the bent beams, the sagging belts, the crane now resting with its hook touching the floor like a finger to lips. "It is," he said, "and I will not let it choke." He lifted both hands. The conveyor belt straightened by inches. The crane cable relaxed. The forklift forks lowered and kissed the ground. The metal made a new sound. Not a cry, not a protest, just a low, steady tone. like something settling into a chair that fits. Behind them, something else moved in the fog, slower. He felt it in the bolts of a far wall. Danse stiffened. "We're not alone." He smiled slightly. "Good," he said. "Then they can hear how this place answers back." The train yard lay spread out like a rib cage picked clean. Tracks twisted away from each other in wrong directions, rails peeled up and braided by old heat. Boxcars leaned together in crooked rows, their doors hanging open like mouths that had forgotten what they were for. Wind slid through the gaps and found the rust. It worried at it, coaxed it loose. Flakes drifted down in thin red curls and whispered when they touched the ground. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It sounded like insects chewing metal. He walked between the cars and let the sound map the place for him. Each step stirred more rust from the sides of the wagons. The flakes caught on his boots, stained the leather the color of dried blood. Piper climbed up onto a low flatbed and squinted into the distance. "So this is where you build your castle?" "A spine," he said. "Castles crumble. Spines endure." Danse surveyed the perimeter, visor up. "This yard connects 3 major routes. You hold it, you control traffic." Strong dragged a length of chain behind him, its links knocking together. Strong like big bones. Codsworth hovered close to a derailed tanker car, peering into the open hatch. It smells of history and oil, mostly oil. The wind lifted again and ran along the rails. The rust answered with a dry, papery sigh. He felt it as vibration, 1,000 small complaints inside the steel. "Come," he said. He raised one hand. The nearest boxcar shuddered. Its wheels screeched against the track and then lifted, just enough to pivot. Rust rained down as the car swung slowly into place across 2 parallel rails, blocking the open approach. The sound of it settling was a long scrape, like a blade drawn across stone. Piper's mouth fell open. "You're building a wall out of trains." "Out of memory," he replied. He gestured again. Another car slid forward, its coupler knocking against the first with a hollow clang. The rust between them crumbled and fell in a soft hiss. He eased them together until their sides kissed and held. Scrape, clang, hiss. The yard began to change its shape. Danse watched, jaw tight. "You're making a fortress?" "A shelter that bites back," he said. Strong climbed onto a coal car and beat up his chest. "Strong, king of train bones!" The wind threaded through the growing barrier and found new edges to worry at. The flakes fell thicker now, drifting like red snow. They scraped against each other as they landed, a faint, dry rain. From the far end of the yard came movement, figures picking their way over ties and scrap. Settlers from the camp, drawn by the noise. One carried a sack of tools, another held a child's hand. The woman with white streaks in her hair stepped forward. "You're tearing the place apart." "I am putting it back into a shape that can say no," he said. She folded her arms. "To who?" "To men who think walls are made of skin." A raider shot rang out from beyond the far fence, a wild test. The bullet struck a boxcar and sparked. The echo ran along the cars and died. Danse snapped his rifle up. Piper ducked behind a wheel assembly. He did not turn. The rust on the struck car peeled away in a sudden, angry cloud. The bullet's impact dented the steel inward, and he felt the dent like a bruise. He pressed his palm into the air. The dent smoothed. The rail beneath that car rose an inch, lifted by ties that had forgotten how to bend. The car leaned forward, blocking the gap in the fence. "You see?" he said, voice carrying across the yard. "Even your mistakes can be arranged." Another shot, this one went wide. Strong picked up a loose wheel and held it like a shield. "Shooty men scared of walls." Codsworth bobbed nervously. "Perhaps they'll take the hint, sir." He drew the rails together at the mouth of the yard. They bent inward with a low groan, forming a funnel that pointed toward the heart of the cars. Every movement pulled more rust loose. It drifted and scraped and whispered as it fell. Inside the ring of cars, the sound changed. The wind could no longer run straight through. It curled and circled, finding every seam, teasing every flake. The yard began to murmur to itself. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Piper climbed down from the flatbed and stood near him. You know what they'll call this? Names are a small tax on new things, he said. They'll call it Magneto's teeth. He considered the rows of boxcars, their rusted sides now angled like jaws. Good. Let them think before they walk into a mouth. The settlers moved closer. The boy with glowing eyes ran his hand along a rail and left a pale line in the rust. It flaked away beneath his touch. Does it hurt them? The boy asked. Only when they try to break it, he said. Danse stepped beside him. You're drawing a line. I am teaching the ground where to stand, he said. At the far fence, the raiders hesitated. One lowered his rifle, another backed away, boots crunching on gravel. The wind found the loose rust between the boxcars and set it moving. The flakes brushed against each other. 1,000 soft contacts. The sound filled the space between the walls and turned into something like breath. Strong sniffed. Wall sound hungry. It is only listening, he said. He lifted both hands and brought the last car into place at the yard's narrowest throat. Its wheels shrieked and then settled. The rust slid down its sides in sheets, scraping as it went. The barrier closed. Silence followed. Not complete, but heavier. The yard held its breath. Piper wiped rust off her fingers. You've made a city out of corpses. He looked at the trains, their numbers faded, their doors scarred with old logos and newer bullets. I have given them a job again, he said. Behind them, Codsworth hovered up to the top of a tanker and looked out over the ring of cars. It does feel rather secure. Strong leaned against a coupler and listened to the rust fall. Bones talking? He nodded. Bones remember what held them together. Beyond the fence, the raiders melted back into the waste. Their footsteps faded. The yard's whisper remained. Scrape, scrape, scrape. He stood at the center of it and let the sound settle into him, into the rails and the wheels and the long, patient spines of the cars. This will stand, he said quietly, not because it is strong, but because it agrees with itself. Dust moved with intention out here. It did not drift, it marched. It slid across the hard pan in low sheets, catching on every ridge of scrap armor and every bent signpost along the caravan trail. When it touched metal, it stayed, clinging to plates and hinges, settling into the grooves of rivets like something that had finally found a home. The caravan appeared first as silhouettes, Brahmin heads bobbing, wagon frames creaking, a line of people stitched together by rope and habit. Their armor was a language of scavenging, license plates sewn to leather, saucepan lids wired over shoulders, traffic cones cut into knee guards. Dust coated it all in the same dull skin. They saw the train yard wall before they saw him. The lead guard raised a hand. The caravan slowed. Wheels groaned. A Brahmin snorted and shook its head, sending a small cloud into the air. Piper leaned against a rail and squinted. They look tired. They look hunted, Danse said. Strong sat on a coupler, picking rust flakes off his knuckles. Dust tastes bad. He stepped forward. The dust reached his boots and climbed, leaving pale fingerprints on the black leather. It found the seams of his gloves and the ridge of his helmet and stayed there obedient and quiet. A woman detached herself from the caravan and walked toward him. Her coat was patched with road maps. Her face was lined the way stone lines itself when water never rests. You the one with the wall, she said. I am the one who listens to it, he replied. She nodded once. Raiders burned our last camp. Took 2 kids and a wheel. We heard there was a place where guns stopped working right. Danse stiffened. Piper stopped writing. Strong grinned. Metal man make guns sad. The woman looked past him at the ring of boxcars. We don't want to own it. We just want to pass through without bleeding. The dust crept higher on his coat. It traced the lines of metal beneath fabric, making a faint map of what he was. How many? He asked. 32, counting the sick. A boy coughed behind her, a wet, shallow sound. The dust clung to his mouth and turned it gray. Piper hopped down from the rail. You planning to turn them away? He did not answer her. He watched the dust settle on the caravan's armor. Every plate took it differently. Some drank it in, some shed it in thin slides. The metal told him where it was loose, where it was afraid. Your weapons, he said to the woman. Lower them. A murmur ran through the guards. They're all we've got, one said. They are also why others follow you, he replied. Metal smells metal. The woman studied him. You want us naked? I want you honest. She turned and raised her hand. Slowly, rifles came down. A machete slid back into a sheath made from tire tread. The dust settled on the barrels and muzzles, quieting their shine. From beyond the fence, a shape moved, one of the raiders, watching. The dust revealed him by how it did not stick to his goggles. Strong growled low in his throat. He lifted 2 fingers. A loose sheet of steel on the wall slid forward and tilted, blocking the gap where the raider watched. The dust fell on it in a soft line. Inside, he said. They entered between the angled cars. The sound changed as soon as they crossed the threshold. The wind could not run straight here. It circled and sighed. Dust brushed against steel and made a sound like dry breath. The caravan parked in the yard's belly. The Brahmins stamped and left round prints that filled with pale powder. A man laid down a crate and wiped his face, leaving a clean streak through grime. The woman approached him again. We heard stories that you stop bullets and bend roads. Stories are dust with opinions, he said. She looked at the wall. Can you keep them off us? Dan stepped closer. This is not a permanent refuge. The woman's jaw set. Nothing is. A child touched a boxcar and left a small handprint in rust and dust. The print stayed. Piper cleared her throat. You can't protect everyone. He turned to her. I know. He looked back at the caravan, at the plates sewn to coats, at the way dust had claimed every edge and made them all the same color. I can make this place difficult, he said. I cannot make it kind. The woman met his eyes. Difficult is a miracle. From the far fence came a shout. A raider fired. The bullet struck a rail and sparked. Dust jumped. He did not move. The rail bent just enough to swallow the dent. The spark died. The dust resettled. The caravan guards stared. Metal man make wall eat bullets, Strong said, pleased. The woman swallowed. You want something for this? Yes, he said. Do not build a shrine to me. Build wheels. Build water filters. Teach your children how to unjam doors. She hesitated, then laughed once, sharp and tired. You don't want worship. I want neighbors. Another shot rang out. This one hit a boxcar and left a white scar in rust. The dust slid down it like snow off a roof. He raised his hand. The rails at the yard's mouth drew closer by inches. The gap narrowed. A coupler slid into place with a heavy knock. The wall learned a new word. No, he said, not loudly. The shots stopped. Inside the yard, people began to move. Someone unpacked a pot. Someone laid a blanket on the ground. The dust settled on all of it, making everything look equally temporary. Piper leaned close to him. They'll start thinking you're the reason they're safe. They are safe because they agreed with the ground, he said. She watched the caravan's children trace patterns in dust on a rail. You're building a country out of scrap. I am building a pause, he replied, between fear and habit. The woman returned with a canteen and offered it. He did not take it. The dust on the metal rim looked like a pale ring. We leave at dawn, she said, if you let us. Dawn is not mine to give, he said. The gate is. He opened the rail a fraction more so the wind could breathe. Dust slid through and painted the inner cars. Strong lay down in the shade of a boxcar and let dust coat his boots. Dust blanket nice. Danse stood watch at the narrowed mouth. Piper wrote with dust on a panel until the wind erased it. He listened to the yard, to the scrape of flakes, to the soft brush of powder against plates. You may stay the night, he told the caravan. In the morning, you will leave with less noise than you brought. The woman nodded. That's all we ever ask. The dust kept working, slow and thorough, turning armor into stone and fear into something that could be walked on. The ruins of the old power plant waited for him like a patient predator. Concrete walls, fractured and pitted, leaned inward as though tired of standing. Steel girders jutted from the skeleton of the roof, their ends curled like the claws of some long-dead bird. Broken pipes hung from the ceiling in arcs, dripping water that smelled of rust and oil, and somewhere deep inside, a faint, low hum ran through the floor. He felt it first as a vibration in the soles of his boots, a quiet pulse that thrummed with promise. Codsworth hovered beside him, jet thrusters jittering in nervous bursts. "Sir, this location, I dare say it is aggressively unwelcoming. May I suggest another approach?" "No," he said. "It is exactly where it must be." Piper squinted at the shadows beneath the girders. "You sure you don't just like the creepy factor? Because this place has it in spades." Strong nudged a rusted generator with his boot. "Strong like scary. Strong smash if scary attack." Dance's visor glinted against the shafts of pale light cutting through holes in the roof. "Sensors are picking movement. Feral ghouls and raiders. Scouts, I think. They're testing the perimeter." He did not answer. Instead, he closed his eyes. Not to block the scene, but to feel it. The metal in the walls vibrated faintly, responding to the faint hum of a half-broken transformer buried somewhere beneath the concrete. The pipes groaned under their own weight. The steel rebar inside the walls sang in response to his pulse. "They are listening," he said softly, "and so I must speak clearly." He raised a hand. The nearest pipe trembled, coils bending just enough to sing a short note. A dangling conduit lifted, twisted, and looped around a steel beam before settling back. Rust and grime slid along the surfaces like water, and the hum beneath his boots rose louder and steadier. "Holy hell," Piper breathed. "You're not just moving metal, you're conducting it." Strong crouched low, feeling the vibration in the floor. "Strong, feel bones talk." The first scouting appeared at the far end of the plant, a raider in mismatched armor carrying a pistol. His boots crunched over broken concrete. He raised the weapon, aiming carefully. He tilted his head. The metal around the raider shifted subtly. Pipes bent, conduits lifted, floor panels tilted. The pistol trembled in the raider's hands, shaking violently before it finally collapsed in a tangle of spring and screw. The raider froze. "What? What the hell?" The second raider sprinted forward, waving a rusty crowbar. He slipped on a puddle of coolant and landed flat on his back. The crowbar bounced uselessly against a pipe, which wrapped itself around the metal and bent like it had remembered its first purpose. Danse fired, controlled bursts, but the raiders were already subdued by the environment itself. He stepped forward, boots crunching over broken gravel. The floor pulsed beneath him in tiny vibrations. His hand brushed a nearby girder, and it straightened, quelling the tension in the structure. Dust fell from the ceiling, brushing his helmet like faint rain. The smell of rust, oil, and wet stone filled his nostrils, sharp and electric. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked the raiders, voice calm, measured, carrying over the hum of the plant. They stared, shaking, trying to lift weapons that refused to obey. "I am not here to kill," he continued. "I am here to teach. Metal remembers. Steel knows who is careless, and so do I." The raiders scrambled backward, hands raised. Strong pointed a thick finger. "Strong like small bones. Not move fast." A transformer sparked somewhere above, sending a ribbon of blue electricity through a broken conduit. It arched toward the ceiling and fizzled out against a corroded beam. The raiders flinched. He watched it, not afraid, guiding the current with the smallest motion of his fingers. It folded inward, settling harmlessly, energy redirected through old cabling, humming steadily. Codsworth whirred softly. "Remarkable, sir. Truly. The building responds to your suggestions." Piper wiped dust from her notebook and scribbled furiously. "If anyone sees this, they'll call you a monster or a magician." "I am neither," he said. "I am someone who listens." The raiders tried again, lunging with hands and sticks, but the metal twisted in answer. Pipes bent, beams shifted. One raider stumbled into a hanging chain, which lifted and coiled around him, pinning him lightly to a pillar. The coil vibrated softly, murmuring in protest, but held him fast. "Enough," he said. His voice carried an edge that made the air itself thrum. "Leave and you do not return. Break and you do not rise." The raiders, shaking, slumped to their knees. Danse kept his rifle trained, but even he seemed to recognize the futility of action against him. Strong laughed softly. "Strong like funny. Metal mean business." The plant seemed to exhale as he walked further in. Dust fell from girders, landing in soft piles. The hum beneath his boots steadied, as if the building itself had accepted his presence. Piper stepped beside him. "You really think you can hold all this together?" He glanced at the maze of metal, at the twisted girders and fallen walls. "I do not hold it. I negotiate." From the far end of the plant, a door rattled. More figures approached, drawn by noise and the promise of easy prey. He raised a hand. Steel pipes groaned and curved, lifting off the floor to form barriers. Hanging cables coiled like serpents, blocking corridors. The hum of the old transformer rose into a steady chord, vibrating through the concrete and the remaining debris. Dust swirled, spinning in eddies around the raiders. "They learn," he said, "but I am patient." Danse lowered his rifle slightly. Piper peeked around a rusted girder, eyes wide. Strong tapped a fallen toolbox. "Strong like wall teeth!" The newcomers froze, unsure which way to go. The plant seemed alive, the metal whispering, bending, threatening, but not yet striking. He stepped forward into the center of the factory floor, letting the vibration of old steel and electricity fill him. "This is my classroom," he said, "and every tool has a lesson." The first group of raiders slowly retreated. The rest followed. The plant remained silent, save for the soft hum beneath the floor, the creak of pipes settling, and the whisper of dust spiraling through the shafts of pale light. He lowered his hand. The factory exhaled. Rust settled. Metal relaxed. Codsworth hovered beside him. "A brilliant display, sir. Terrifying, but orderly." He looked around at the vast space, at the fallen machines and the twisted girders. "Order," he said, "is not given. It is remembered." Strong clapped his hands together, sending a spray of dust into the air. "Strong like boss." Piper scribbled furiously in her notebook. "And I thought the train yard was impressive." Danse exhaled slowly. This changes the balance." He nodded slightly. "It only reminds them what balance feels like." And in the shadows of the power plant, metal hummed, listening and learning. The ruined bridge stretched across the river like a skeleton abandoned mid-step. Concrete piers jutted from the water in uneven columns, their surfaces scarred with bullet holes and crumbling at the edges. Steel beams sagged between them, warped by fire and neglect. The river below whispered, carrying the metallic tang of rust and runoff. Each wave slapped against the piers with a wet crunch, rising and falling in rhythm, with the low hum of something half buried under the bridge. Pipes, rebar, forgotten machinery, waiting. He stepped onto the first pier. The concrete felt brittle beneath his boots, dust rising in faint plumes with each careful step. Codsworth hovered nearby, thrusters sputtering in small bursts, eyes scanning the broken structure. "Sir, this bridge is structurally challenged. Shall I accompany you along the safer paths?" "No," he said. "This bridge is not for safety. It is for truth." Piper perched on a fractured beam to his left, notebook balanced precariously. "You always talk like a poet. You ever consider maybe we just want to cross the river?" Dance's armor creaked as he climbed beside them. "Scouts report movement upstream. Mutants, raiders, something heavier than the usual scouts." Strong flexed his thick arms. "Strong like bridge bones, strong smash if needed." He closed his eyes, not to rest, but to feel. Metal answered. The rusted girders vibrated faintly, responding to his presence. Broken bolts loosened in the wind. Pipes lining the underbelly shivered. Nails loosened themselves, sliding with soft clicks. The low hum beneath the pier rose like a heartbeat, synchronized with his own pulse. From upstream, shapes emerged. Mirelurks, 2 adults, one smaller, scuttling along a half-submerged pier, shells glistening in wet light. Their legs churned the water, sending spray that stung his gloves. Feral ghouls followed, more cautious this time, slowed by corrosion and careful calculation. Piper whispered, "You think they know you're coming?" "They know metal," he said, "and metal knows them." He lifted a hand. The nearest steel beam quivered. A rusted cable overhead twisted like a rope in the hands of a giant. The Mirelurks reared, claws scrabbling, but found themselves pinned by the weight of old metal, bent just enough to trap their shells without breaking them. The ghouls lunged and floor panels shifted underfoot, tilting them sideways. Wet crunches punctuated their landing. Strong growled in delight. "Strong like this! Smash! No! Metal bite!" A distant gunshot rang out from the far shore. Danse fired in reply. Discipline burst, but the raider's bullets never reached him. He could feel each projectile's path through the steel in the bridge, its angle and velocity bending in micro-motions as the girders adjusted. One round hit a loose beam, which twisted and deflected it harmlessly. The Mirelurks struggled against the warped steel. Their claws scraped across rebar, producing a high-pitched squeal of metal on metal. He tilted his head and extended a finger. A cable lifted, wrapping around the largest Mirelurk's claw, guiding it to rest flat against the beam. Its shell scraped the steel, leaving deep grooves, but it could not move further. The other Mirelurk froze in confusion as the girder shifted again, blocking its escape. "You see," he murmured, "metal does not forget. It punishes only the careless." One raider scrambled across a collapsed section, trying to flank them. The beam beneath his feet groaned and bent upward slightly. His boots slipped, sending him sprawling against a pillar. He clutched at a hanging pipe, which twisted and snapped, leaving him dangling precariously. Codsworth whirred nervously. "Perhaps, sir, a little dramatic?" "Necessary," he said. Piper ducked behind a beam and fired at a second raider, who had ventured too close. The bullet struck a loose girder, which twisted and swung, knocking him off balance. The raider fell, arms flailing, crashing against debris with a wet, metallic thunk. Strong bellowed, "Strong like this! Metal helps strong!" He advanced along the pier. Every step pressed the vibration of the bridge into his boots. He brushed a finger along a cable, sending it coiling and tightening with perfect precision. Other cables followed, slithering along beams, trapping the ghouls without crushing them. Every scrap of metal listened. Every bolt, every beam, every rusted plate responded to his presence like a choir. The raiders screamed and retreated. One tried to fire blindly into the shifting structure, but the girders bent again. The bullet ricocheted harmlessly into the river. He tilted his head toward the Mirelurks. "Leave," he said quietly, "or linger in discomfort." They slid backward, shells scraping, legs folding awkwardly, and disappeared into the dark water upstream. The ghouls hesitated, then backed away, hissing in frustration. The bridge exhaled. Pipes settled back into their grooves. Girders creaked as they straightened. Cables slackened. Dust and rust fell in quiet streams to the river below. Danse exhaled, lowering his rifle. That was effective. Piper clambered down to a lower beam. "You didn't even touch most of them." He ran a gloved hand along a rail, feeling the vibrations calm. "Touch is not always necessary. Presence suffices." Strong stomped his foot. "Strong like boss! Strong like metal teeth!" From the far shore, movement stopped. The remaining raiders paused at the water's edge, watching. One raised a hand in surrender. He spoke to them across the river, voice calm and even. "Leave this place. Learn to respect what bends before you. Otherwise, you will find no passage." The wind carried his words across the water, rust and dust swirling in small eddies. The river's current pressed against the piers, lapping at their bases. The hum beneath his boots slowed, steady now, as though the bridge had accepted its new order. The Mirelurks disappeared into deeper water, leaving behind only wet scratches on the girders. Codsworth hovered close. "Sir, that was remarkable and terrifying. Perhaps both." "Metal does not act without reason," he said. "Only fools forget that." Piper scribbled furiously. "You just turned a bridge into a lesson plan." Danse looked out across the river. "You've created a deterrent. Everyone who watches will think twice before crossing." He nodded slightly, letting the vibration of the bridge settle into silence. "Yes, and now the river listens too." Strong leaned against a beam and watched the water swirl around the piers. "Strong like river bones. Safe now?" "Safe enough," he said, "for those willing to walk wisely." The wind lifted rust flakes from the girders, and the bridge seemed to hum a quiet approval. The Mirelurk's shells had left scratches, the ghouls' claws dense, but the structure endured, reshaped by the patient will of metal. He stood at the center, boots planted on cracked concrete, and listened to the river, the wind, the cables, and the faint hum beneath the bridge. Everything waits, he said softly, and now it knows what it must fear. The bridge held, the water lapped, the wind whispered, and he walked forward toward the far pier, leaving the echoes of obedience behind. The warehouse smelled like smoke and vinegar. Charred beams sagged overhead, blackened like teeth, and the walls were streaked with soot and radiation burns. Broken crates littered the floor, some smashed open to reveal nails, rope, and tin cans that had long since lost their labels. The air was thick with the scent of wet metal, something that had been forgotten too long underground, and the faint chemical tang of coolant oozing from a ruptured barrel. Every step he took sent dust motes spiraling in slow, lazy clouds, catching the dim shafts of sunlight that filtered through holes in the roof. Codsworth hovered nearby, thrusters stuttering. "Sir, may I suggest caution? This area is decidedly unstable." "I do not come for caution," he said, voice low. "I come to listen." Piper perched on a stack of crates, notebook balanced on her knee. "You always listen to things that want to kill us. Ever think of listening to something nice?" Strong grunted, examining a rusted gear with one massive hand. "Strong like bones. Strong smash bad things." Dance's visor glinted as he scanned the perimeter. "Sensors indicate multiple hostiles, feral ghouls and raiders, all converging toward this location, likely scavenger HQ." He closed his eyes, not to ignore the warehouse, but to feel it. Steel beams quivered faintly under his concentration, old bolts loosening in quiet protest. Pipes groaned, cables vibrated in response to the faint hum of a half-buried generator. Rust shifted as though it had a mind of its own. Every scrap of metal, every nail, every warped crate listened and remembered. A screech echoed from the far corner. A ghoul, its skin mottled and torn, lunging toward a stack of barrels. Its hands scraped the metal, leaving long, wet streaks. He stepped forward and the steel beneath his boots pulsed softly. "Do not rush," he said. The ghoul's claws struck a metal crate. The sound of tearing steel rang through the warehouse, high-pitched and shrill. He lifted a hand. The crate flexed, bending in on itself. It pinched the ghoul's fingers, holding them without crushing. The creature hissed, flailing, but could not escape. "Metal obeys reason," he said. "You are not reasonable." Another screech, this time a raider emerging from the shadows, pistol raised. He fired. The bullet struck a pipe above, which twisted and clanged as it deflected the round harmlessly. Another shot, same result. The third bullet ricocheted off a steel beam and lodged in a crate. Strong laughed, slapping his thigh. "Strong like metal, boss. Shoot him and fail." He moved toward the raider, fingertips brushing a hanging cable. The cable coiled in the air, wrapping lightly around the man's arm. His weapon clattered to the floor, sliding across broken crates. Dan stepped up. "They're more dangerous in numbers." "Numbers are metal too," he said. He lifted another hand, and the beams overhead shifted slightly. One groaned, swinging a dangling pipe toward the next raider, forcing him back. Piper scribbled frantically. "You just used the whole warehouse like a giant puppet." "Not puppet," he said. "Symphony. Every piece knows its part." A sudden movement near the back revealed two more ghouls, approaching slowly, hunched over. Their skin peeled in translucent layers, glowing faintly under the sun shafts. Wet crunch echoed with each step. He extended both hands this time. Pipes lifted, beams bent, and cables slithered across the floor. The ghouls were pinned gently, unable to move forward, yet untouched by harm. The warehouse itself seemed to rise against them, a living trap of bent metal and deliberate force. Codsworth hovered closer, lens wide. "Sir, the level of control here, it is remarkable." "Not control," he said. "Guidance." One raider, desperate, charged from a crate stack. He aimed a jagged pipe like a club. The beam he stepped on creaked in warning. The floor tilted slightly, throwing him off balance. A hanging chain wrapped around the pipe mid-swing, halting its momentum. The man stumbled, crashing into a pile of tin cans. Strong roared in approval. "Strong like boss! Strong like teeth snap!" Piper peered through a gap in the crates. "You're not even touching most of them, just rearranging the warehouse." Metal remembers what is loose, he said. It punishes the careless. I only ask the right questions. From above, a fan blade, rusted and half-fallen, shifted under his thought. It swung slowly, casting a moving shadow across the floor. The ghouls and raiders froze under it, hesitant to move. The generator hum pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. He stepped into the center of the warehouse, letting the vibrations spread through the beams, through the floor, through every scrap of metal. Learn, he said softly, voice carrying across the space. Metal does not forgive. Metal remembers. You may leave now, or remain and feel the consequences of ignorance. The raiders and ghouls hesitated. Then slowly they backed toward the exits, careful not to touch the twisted, bending steel. One raider tripped on a crate but was stopped by a cable looping lightly around his arm, leaving him suspended for a brief second before letting him down. The warehouse fell silent except for the hum of the generator and the occasional drip from a broken pipe. Dust settled in thin clouds around them. Rust flakes fell like red snow, drifting in slow arcs. Danse lowered his rifle. They'll think twice before coming back, Piper exhaled. You just turned a ruin into a deterrent. A lesson. Strong leaned on a beam, grinning. Strong like bones safe. Strong happy. Codsworth floated closer. Remarkable, sir. Terrifying, but effective. He ran a gloved hand along a steel beam. Metal does not move without reason. Neither should men. This place remembers now. The sunlight shifted through a hole in the roof, catching the dust in gold shafts. The ghouls had fled. The raiders had fled. The warehouse stood, scarred but obedient, alive in its own silent, watchful way. Everything that survives here, he said softly, must learn to obey the rules it cannot break. He stepped back, letting the vibrations settle, letting the warehouse breathe. And in the quiet, the metal whispered, and the dust remembered. The ruins of the refinery sprawled across the horizon like a jagged crown. Towers of corroded steel leaned at impossible angles, their pipes bent and twisted, venting faint puffs of radioactive steam that smelled like burnt metal and rotten eggs. The ground was slick with oil and dust mixed into mud, sticky under boots, leaving prints that refused to dry. Broken ladders hung over vats of sludge, swinging gently in the wind. Every gust carried the clink of loose metal and the low moan of twisting girders. He stepped carefully over a fallen support beam, boots sinking slightly into mud, vibration pulsing faintly from the corroded floor plates. Codsworth hovered beside him, jets sputtering. Sir, the structure is highly unstable. Would caution be advisable? No caution, he said. Only presence. Metal listens, but it must know authority. Piper followed behind, scanning the twisted walkways. You always sound like you're talking to the building, not us. Strong grunted, hefting a chunk of pipe. Strong like big bones. Strong ready smash bad things. Dance's rifle was raised, visor glinting. Scouts report movement from both sides. Raiders and feral ghouls are converging toward the refinery, likely hoping to loot what remains. He closed his eyes, letting the refinery speak to him. Steel trembled under the weight of his attention, pipes groaned, cables vibrated along the walls. Rust shifted in quiet murmurs. Bolts loosened themselves in soft, protesting clicks. Every beam, every scaffold, every jagged piece of metal answered his presence. From the far side, the first raiders appeared, cautious, advancing across the broken catwalks. They raised rifles, but the beams beneath their boots shivered, bending enough to unbalance them. Shots rang out, sparks flew as bullets struck metal at odd angles. One ricocheted harmlessly into a broken drum. Stay calm, he said, fingertips brushing a hanging chain. The chain lifted and coiled around the nearest raider, guiding him gently to the floor. The weapon slid out of his hands and clattered across the concrete. The first ghoul appeared at the edge of a collapsed platform. Its claws scratched metal beams as it climbed forward. Wet crunch echoed through the refinery. He lifted a hand. The beam under the ghoul flexed, tilting slightly, and it slid sideways, flailing but unable to advance. Rust flaked from the edges, sprinkling like red dust on the wet floor. You see, he said, metal punishes the careless and obeys the patient. The raiders scrambled, trying to flank him. One fired blindly at a hanging pipe. Sparks erupted as the shot struck steel, and the pipe twisted in response, knocking the raider off balance. Another raider slipped on the slick mud, caught only by a dangling cable he had failed to notice. Strong roared in delight. Strong like teeth of metal. Strong like boss. He moved to the center of the refinery. With a soft lift of his hands, cables and pipes shifted, forming barriers and guiding the intruders into the center of the collapsed structure. Rusted girders groaned under strain, bending and twisting to contain the raiders without harming them. Danse exhaled slowly. This is incredible. They're trapped, but you haven't even touched them. Presence suffices, he said. Metal obeys reason, and so must men. A raider charged at a pipe that had swung into place, trying to knock it aside. The pipe reacted, coiling like a spring and pinning him lightly against a steel wall. Another tried to aim a rifle, but the floor beneath him shifted, making him stumble. The ghouls, seeing the raiders falter, hesitated and began backing away. Wet crunches echoed as claws slid across slick metal. Piper scribbled notes furiously. You're turning a whole refinery into… what exactly? A cage? A lesson? A weapon? All three, he said. Metal has rules. So do I. From above, a section of a collapsed catwalk shifted slightly under his thought, scraping against the beams with a high-pitched wail. The sound froze the raiders, making them glance upward, uncertain. Codsworth hovered close. Sir, your ability to direct this, it borders on unnatural. Terrifying, but effective. He stepped forward, boots crunching over rust flakes and mud. Every step transmitted vibrations through the metal structure. Cables stretched, pipes bent, beams groaned. The refinery hummed beneath him, alive with recognition. Learn, he said softly. Metal does not forgive the careless. Neither should you. The raiders slowly began retreating, dragging their injured pride with them. The ghouls skulked into shadows, cautious of the shifting beams and coiled cables. Strong clapped his hands. Strong like teeth, safe. Strong, happy. Danse lowered his rifle, nodding. You've created a deterrent they won't forget. Piper looked around the towering metal and twisted pipes. I don't even know how you do it. You just make the building fight for you. Not fight, he said. Teach. Metal remembers, and it communicates with those who listen. The hum of the refinery settled into a steady pulse. Rust flakes drifted down in slow, lazy arcs, landing on beams, pipes, and slick mud. Shadows shifted with the angle of the sun. He ran a gloved hand along a beam, feeling the vibration calm beneath his touch. Everything here waits, and now it knows what to obey and what to fear. A shaft of light caught the wet mud beneath a girder, illuminating the prints of the raiders and ghouls as they left. The marks remained, reminders of missteps and errors. Codsworth whirred. Remarkable, sir. A structure shaped by thought, not hands. Terrifying, yet precise. He looked across the refinery, surveying the twisted metal, hanging pipes, and displaced girders. Control is an illusion. Obedience is learned. Strong tapped the floor with a thick finger. Strong like bones, listen now. Piper exhaled slowly, brushing dust from a fallen beam. I think even I'm scared of you sometimes. He did not answer. He only listened to the low hum of metal, the scrape of rust, the settling of beams, and the distant drip of coolant. And in the silence that followed, the refinery itself seemed to breathe, obedient, aware, and ready to punish anyone foolish enough to challenge it again. Let them remember, he said quietly. The wind carried the words through the twisted pipes and broken steel. The dust settled. The raiders and ghouls had fled, leaving the refinery scarred but alive, reshaped by his presence. And he stepped forward, moving through the metal, the vibrations beneath his boots steady, leaving the lessons of obedience behind him. The scrapyard stretched into the distance like a graveyard for machines. Rusted cars leaned into each other like drunken companions. Tank treads, bent pipes, and twisted girders littered the ground. Every surface was coated with the scent of iron and dust, mingling with the faint tang of gasoline and decayed oil. Wind ran across the yard in low currents, scraping metal against metal, producing soft screeches and faint clatters that echoed between piles of wreckage. He stepped onto the ground, boots crunching against a bed of flaked paint and crushed metal. The vibration from the scattered girders ran up through his soles, soft and steady, like a pulse waiting to answer. Codsworth hovered beside him, thrusters jittering. "Sir, the yard. It appears to have been abandoned for decades. Very chaotic," Codsworth said. "Chaos has order," he said. "You only need to listen long enough to understand it." Piper climbed at the top a heap of car doors, peering across the yard. "You always make it sound like the metal's alive. Do you ever just leave it alone?" Strong hefted a bumper, testing its weight. "Strong like bones. Strong smash. Metal like snack." Danse surveyed the perimeter, rifle raised. Movement detected on 3 sides. Raiders and ghouls. Probably scouting. They smell weakness. He closed his eyes. Metal answered. Rusted beams shifted faintly. Nails loosened in protest. Pipes quivered along their bent lengths. The entire yard pulsed with subtle vibrations, each piece of scrap resonating to his presence. The pile of car hoods to his left creaked, leaning slightly, listening. From the far edge of the yard, a raider appeared, stepping over twisted girders with a pistol raised. Wet crunches accompanied each step. 2 feral ghouls followed, their claws scraping metal. Piper hissed, "Here we go." He raised a hand. A car hood lifted from the pile beside him and tilted gently. The raider froze as the hood hovered, blocking his path. A wind of rust flakes swirled around him, clinging to his clothes, covering his boots. The ghouls advanced, only to find the steel beneath their claws shifting, tilting them sideways and forcing them off balance. Strong laughed. "Strong like boss, strong make metal bite." The raider fired. The bullet struck a bent pipe and ricocheted into a stack of tires, which collapsed with a loud thump. Another shot went wide, striking a pile of girders. They flexed under the force and returned to their original position, holding him in place with silent pressure. He stepped forward, boots pressing into the flaked paint and oil-slicked mud. Every step sent vibrations through the yard, coaxing metal into motion. He touched a hanging chain, and it lifted, coiling around a ghoul to block its advance. "You see," he murmured, "metal obeys reason. You will, if you hope to survive." The raider tried to flank him, crawling under a tilted car door. He rose too quickly, and a scrap of pipe dropped, landing across his back and forcing him down. The ghouls hissed, claws scraping uselessly on beams that had shifted just enough to deny them purchase. Piper scribbled notes frantically. You're just bending everything, and they can't touch you. They're trapped without even being hit." "Presence suffices," he said. "The yard learns quickly. It punishes the careless, rewards the observant." From above, a steel girder twisted slightly, scraping against a hanging fan with a high-pitched squeal. The sound froze the raiders in place. Wet crunches echoed from the ghouls, hesitant, confused by the motion of the yard itself. Codsworth hovered closer, lens wide. "Sir, your influence on this environment, it's almost unnatural, effective, yet terrifying." He stepped to the center of the scrapyard. With hands lifted, he guided pipes and car doors into new positions, forming barriers, channels, and subtle traps. Rust flakes fell like red snow, swirling in eddies as the metal bent to his will. Danse exhaled slowly. "You've turned a scrapyard into a fortress. They can't even approach." "Not a fortress," he said. "A lesson. Metal remembers. Men should too." Another raider charged, swinging a crowbar. The floor shifted beneath him, and a pile of girders nudged him sideways, tripping him. A hanging cable caught his arm, pinning him lightly against a rusted car hood. Strong roared. "Strong like teeth snap! Strong like metal bite!" The ghouls skulked toward another pile, but the scrap shifted beneath them. Wet crunches echoed, claws scraping uselessly on moving steel. Piper whispered, awed, "You're making the entire place. Listen." He let his hands hover over the yard, feeling the tension in the metal, coaxing it into obedience. Each bolt, each panel, each piece of twisted sheet metal responded, bending, shifting, and holding. The raiders and ghouls froze, caught in the choreography of the scrapyard. He stepped closer to a tangle of girders and cables and pressed a finger against a beam. It flexed, creating a narrow path for his team, while blocking any advance from the enemies. "You will leave," he said softly, voice carrying over the yard, "or remain in discomfort. The choice is yours." The raiders hesitated, then slowly backed toward the edge of the yard. The ghouls retreated, claws scraping, wet crunches fading. Strong slapped his thigh. "Strong like boss safe. Strong happy." Danse lowered his rifle. "They won't be back. Not after this." Piper brushed dust from a leaning car. "You just made a scrapyard into a weapon without even touching most of them." "Not a weapon," he said. "A reminder. Metal listens. Men should too." Codsworth whirred softly. "Remarkable, sir. A lesson etched into steel and rust. Terrifying. Precise." He ran a gloved hand along a leaning beam, feeling the vibration calm beneath his touch. Rust flakes drifted down like snow, landing on twisted pipes and battered cars. "Everything that survives here must obey," he said quietly. "Everything that moves must learn the rules it cannot break." The wind carried his words through the yard, sweeping dust and rust in gentle eddies. The scrapyard exhaled, settling into silent obedience, and he walked forward, leaving behind a yard alive with metal, scarred but patient, waiting for the next lesson. The settlement burned in the distance. Smoke twisted upward from collapsed shacks and toppled caravans, carrying the sharp tang of charred wood and plastic. The wind whipped embers into the cracked earth, and every inhalation carried the scent of ash and scorched metal. The air vibrated with a low, continuous hum, the groan of twisted beams, the settling of rubble, the echo of doors ripped from their hinges. He stood on a low ridge, boots pressing into gravel mixed with dust, feeling the tremor of the ground beneath him. Codsworth hovered nervously at his side. "Sir, the damage appears extensive. Casualties may be high," he said. He did not respond immediately. His eyes swept the settlement, noting which walls had shifted, which metal had bent, which beams could be pressed back into place. Every scrap of steel, every bent pipe, every jagged edge whispered its story to him. "They came through like storms," Piper said, gripping her notebook, "and they left ruin behind." Strong stomped, sending a small cloud of dust into the wind. "Strong smell fire. Strong like bones broken." Danse scanned the outskirts with his rifle. "Scouts report no immediate threat, but raiders and ghouls are still in the area. They may strike again." He closed his eyes. The hum beneath his boots rose, soft but insistent, vibrating through the ridge, traveling into the ruined settlement. Beams, pipes, and twisted metal responded, shifting imperceptibly. Rusted, corrugated walls bent slightly, leaning into their neighbors as though seeking comfort. Doors, long pried from their hinges, lay on the ground, trembling. "They will rebuild," he said quietly. "If metal can remember, so can men." A group of raiders appeared at the edge of the ruins, their weapons raised, scanning the area. Two feral ghouls slunk from the shadows behind them, claws scraping stone and steel, leaving wet crunches in their wake. Piper whispered, "Here they come. Ready?" He lifted one hand. A collapsed metal beam shivered, then twisted, rising to form a barrier between the settlement and the intruders. The raiders froze as the air filled with the scent of heated iron and scorched paint. A hanging chain swung into place, wrapping around a ghoul and pinning it gently. Another piece of corrugated steel leaned forward, blocking the path of the second ghoul. Strong bellowed in delight. "Strong like metal teeth! Strong like bite!" The raiders fired. Bullets struck metal beams, ricocheting harmlessly. A pipe above twisted, deflecting a shot and sending it harmlessly into a pile of rubble. Another round struck a dented door, which shifted slightly under his attention, absorbing the impact. He moved forward, boots crunching against gravel and ash. Each step transmitted vibration into the settlement, coaxing metal to bend and shift with precision. Rust flaked from beams and walls, drifting lazily in the embers' glow. "Do you see?" he said softly. "Metal punishes only the careless. It responds to intention." One raider attempted to charge through a narrow alley between collapsed walls. The walls themselves leaned inward subtly, holding him in place. Another fired blindly, but the steel surrounding him flexed, redirecting the bullet into rubble. The ghouls hissed, claws scraping uselessly on beams that shifted just enough to deny purchase. Wet crunches echoed, faint and frustrated. Piper scribbled furiously in her notebook. "You're turning a destroyed settlement into a cage without touching most of them." "Not a cage," he said. "A reminder. Metal remembers. Men must too." From above, a partially collapsed roof shifted slightly under his attention. It creaked, scraping metal on metal, casting shadows across the intruders. The sound froze them, hesitation rooting them in place. Codsworth hovered closer. "Sir, the way you bend the environment to your will, it is remarkable. Terrifying but precise." He pressed a finger against a bent support beam. It flexed, guiding the metal to form a narrow corridor that allowed his team safe passage while denying the raiders. Danse exhaled slowly. "You're creating a deterrent they won't forget." Strong stomped a hand, leaving a dust cloud. "Strong like teeth safe. Strong happy." He let his hands hover over the settlement, coaxing metal and debris into position. Corrugated walls leaned, beams shifted, pipes bent, all without striking anyone. Rust flakes fell like snow, drifting into corners and settling on the smoldering ground. "Everything that survives here," he said softly, "must learn to obey. Everything that moves must understand what it cannot break." The raiders, realizing the futility of their assault, began to retreat, dragging themselves back over rubble and mud. The ghouls followed, slipping over bent metal, wet crunches fading with each step. Piper brushed ash from a leaning beam. "You just turned their attack into a lesson." "Not a lesson," he said. "A memory. Metal remembers. Men will too." The wind carried the scent of burnt wood and rust, stirring the dust in lazy eddies. The settlement exhaled, rubble settling, walls leaning, metal obedient. He stepped through the center of the ruins, feeling every vibration through his boots. Beams, pipes, and bent walls shifted into quiet harmony. The settlement was scarred but alive, listening, waiting for those who would dare approach again. Codsworth hovered at his side. "Remarkable, sir. A display of power and patience." He looked across the ruins, surveying the twisted metal, collapsed roofs, and scattered debris. "Presence suffices," he said quietly. "Metal obeys reason. Men must learn the same." Strong tapped a fallen girder. "Strong like bones, listen. Strong safe." Piper exhaled slowly. "Even I'm scared of what you can do." He said nothing, listening instead. The low hum of metal settling, the scrape of beams, the faint drip of water onto scorched concrete. And in the silence that followed, the settlement itself seemed to breathe, alive with the memory of destruction, shaped by his will, ready to enforce obedience the next time it was tested. "Let them remember," he murmured. The wind carried his words across the ruins, rust flakes drifting in soft arcs. The fire smoldered, embers curling into ash, and the settlement stood scarred but patient, waiting. And he walked forward, leaving the echoes of obedience behind him. The road stretched ahead, a jagged scar cutting through the gray wasteland. Twisted signs leaned crookedly, faded letters flaking off into the dust. Potholes and collapsed sections of asphalt formed jagged patterns, catching the weak sunlight in dull, reflective pools of oil. The wind carried a mix of scorched earth and the sharp tang of rusted metal, stirring loose gravel with soft crunches that echoed across the barren horizon. He walked at the head of the group, boots heavy on broken asphalt, feeling every vibration through the soles. Codsworth hovered slightly behind, thrusters jittering nervously. "Sir, the road is littered with debris and potentially unstable surfaces," Codsworth said. "Stability is a matter of persuasion," he replied. "Metal will cooperate if it knows who leads." Piper trudged beside him, notebook tucked under her arm, scribbling notes as they moved. "You always treat the ground like it owes you something. Do you ever just walk?" Strong stomped, sending gravel flying. "Strong like bones. Strong lead. Strong makes safe." Danse scanned the horizon, rifle ready. "Movement detected. Raiders and ghouls are converging from the west. They've been tracking the group since the last settlement." He closed his eyes, letting the vibration of the road speak to him. Steel beams buried under asphalt, remnants of collapsed bridges, and rusted guardrails, All hummed faintly in recognition. Rust flaked from jagged metal, drifting in the wind. Every nail, every bolt, every warped signpost listened. From a ridge, raiders emerged, pistol and rifle barrels glinting. Behind them, feral ghouls slunk forward, claws scraping rocks and metal debris with wet crunches. He raised one hand. The nearest guardrail bent, rising slightly to block the raiders' path. A rusted sign twisted overhead, pinning a ghoul against the post without harm. The road beneath the first raider shivered, tilting subtly, throwing him off balance. "Strong like teeth bite!" Strong bellowed, pounding a fist against a metal pipe. Piper ducked behind a broken car, eyes wide. "They're trapped without you even touching most of them." He stepped forward, boots crunching against gravel and oil-slick asphalt. Every step sent vibrations through the buried steel, coaxing it into obedience. Rusted metal groaned, cables lifted from fallen poles. Girders shifted subtly, all moving without direct contact. A raider tried to flank them, moving along the edge of the road. The asphalt he stepped on flexed unevenly, throwing him to his knees. A dangling cable snaked around his arm, pinning him lightly against a broken guardrail. Another fired blindly. The bullet ricocheted off a tilted steel beam and embedded itself harmlessly in debris. "Observe," he said quietly. "Metal punishes the careless. It rewards only attention and respect." Two ghouls advanced from the rubble-strewn roadside, hissing, claws scraping. The steel beneath them twisted and shifted. Wet crunches punctuated each misstep as their balance failed. A twisted guardrail looped around one ghoul's leg, holding it in place. Piper scribbled furiously, voice tense. "You're controlling the road, the debris, the metal. Everything's listening." "Not controlling," he said. "Guiding, teaching, metal remembers. Men should too." From above, the remnants of a collapsed sign swung gently, scraping against its post, creating a high-pitched warning that froze the raiders in place. The ghouls hesitated, claws scraping ineffectively on metal that refused to yield. Codsworth hovered closer, lens wide. "Sir, the precision of your influence, it borders on supernatural, terrifying yet effective." He lifted both hands, coaxing a line of steel beams and broken pipes to form a barrier across the road. Dust and rust flakes rose in slow spirals, landing in red clouds on the asphalt. He pressed a finger against a leaning beam, adjusting it to create a narrow corridor through which his group could move safely while denying the raiders access. Danse exhaled slowly. "This is more than a defense, it's a statement. No one will forget this." Strong stomped again. "Strong like bones safe, strong like teeth snap." He let his hands hover over the road, coaxing each scrap of metal and debris into place. Girders twisted, pipes bent, guardrails leaned. Rust and dust fell like slow snow, filling every crevice and corner. A raider tried to charge the barrier. A beam swung into his path, knocking him sideways. Another aimed a gun but slipped on gravel, caught by a twisted pipe looping around his wrist. The ghouls flinched, claws scraping on steel that bent just enough to deny them grip. "Everything here," he said softly, "must learn to obey. Every movement, every step, every piece of metal carries memory." The raiders and ghouls slowly retreated, realizing the futility of their advance. Wet crunches faded as claws and boots left the manipulated surfaces. Piper brushed dust from her jacket. "You turned the entire road into a trap without killing anyone." "Not a trap," he said. "A reminder. Metal listens. Men must learn to listen as well." The wind carried the scent of rust, oil, and scorched earth. Dust swirled in lazy eddies across the road, settling over twisted metal and broken asphalt. Codsworth hovered beside him. "Remarkable, sir. A lesson etched into every scrap of steel, every twisted girder. Terrifying but precise." He ran a gloved hand along a bent guardrail. "Presence suffices. Metal obeys reason. Men should too." Strong tapped the asphalt with a thick finger. "Strong like bones listen. Strong safe." Piper exhaled slowly. "Even I'm scared of you sometimes." He said nothing, listening instead to the low hum of metal, the scrape of girders, the settling of debris, and the faint hiss of wind across rusted surfaces. And in the silence that followed, The road itself seemed alive, obedient, scarred but patient, ready to enforce the lesson of obedience again. "Let them remember," he murmured. The wind carried his words across the wasteland. Rust flakes drifted in soft arcs, and the road settled into quiet alignment. And he stepped forward, leaving behind a corridor of obedience, a silent warning etched into the bones of metal and dust. The scrapyard at the edge of the city looked like the bones of giants. Twisted steel beams jutted skyward, half buried in dirt and ash. Rusted car frames leaned against each other like mourners, and conveyor belts coiled across the ground like serpents. The wind carried the smell of scorched oil and wet metal, sharp and tangy, and every gust stirred dust and rust flakes into small tornadoes that spun across the broken concrete. Beneath his boots, the ground vibrated faintly, the buried girders and twisted pipes humming softly like a chorus waiting for a conductor. He stepped forward, boots crunching over fragments of metal and flaked paint. Codsworth hovered nervously beside him, thrusters sputtering. "Sir, the scrapyard is heavily compromised. Any misstep could trigger structural collapse," Codsworth said. "Not a misstep," he replied. "A lesson. Metal obeys those who understand it." Piper crouched behind a rusted pickup, notebook ready. "You talk like the metal's alive. Do you ever just leave it be?" Strong hefted a dented steel beam. "Strong like bones. Strong smash bad things. Strong ready." Danse scanned the area, rifle raised. Multiple hostiles approaching, raiders and ghouls. They're moving cautiously, aware of the traps ahead. He closed his eyes. The scrapyard responded immediately. Beams flexed, pipes shifted, nails loosened in quiet protest. Rust flaked from every edge, rising in tiny clouds. Every piece of metal, every bent panel, every jagged car hood listened. From the far side, raiders emerged, guns raised. Two ghouls scuttled behind them, claws scraping steel and glass with wet crunches. He raised a hand. A bent car door lifted and tilted, blocking the first raider. A chain from a hanging conveyor twisted around the closest ghoul, holding it lightly against a support beam. Another pipe shifted, tripping a raider and sending him sprawling across the ground. Strong roared, "Strong like teeth snap! Strong like metal bite!" Piper scribbled frantically. "You didn't even touch most of them, and they're already trapped." He stepped forward, boots crunching over debris-strewn asphalt. Every step sent vibrations through the hidden girders and twisted pipes. Rusted beams bent, panels tilted, cables coiled, all responding without direct contact. Another raider attempted to flank him. The scrap beneath him shifted subtly, tilting the ground and forcing him sideways. He fell against a hanging chain, which coiled around his arm, suspending him gently. "Observe," he said softly. "Metal punishes only the careless. It rewards focus and respect." Two ghouls tried to advance from a mound of rusted car frames. Wet crunches echoed as claws slipped against flexing metal. A bent fence post looped around one ghoul's leg, holding it in place without harm. Piper whispered, awed, "You're orchestrating the entire yard. It's alive under your hands." "Not control," he said. "Guidance. Metal remembers. Men should too." Above them, a fan blade, rusted and twisted, scraped against its mount, producing a high-pitched wail. The raiders froze, uncertainty rooting them in place. The ghouls hissed, claws slipping on bending steel. Codsworth hovered closer. "Sir, your command over the environment, it's almost unnatural. Terrifying, yet precise." He lifted both hands. Cables, beams, and bent pipes shifted, forming a barrier across the yard. Rust flakes and dust swirled in lazy arcs. He pressed a finger against a leaning girder, adjusting it to create a narrow corridor through which his group could move safely while denying the raiders access. Danse exhaled slowly. "You've turned this scrapyard into a fortress without striking most of them." Strong slammed his fist against a beam. "Strong like teeth bite! Strong safe!" He let his hands hover over the scrapyard, sensing every vibration from the beams, pipes, and metal sheets. They bent, twisted, and coiled subtly. Rust fell like snow, settling over debris, girders, and broken car frames. A raider charged, swinging a crowbar. A pipe swung into his path, knocking him sideways. Another raised a rifle, slipping on debris, caught by a coiled cable around his wrist. The ghouls flinched, claws scraping ineffectively against bending steel. "Everything here," he said softly, "must learn to obey. Every scrap of metal, every movement, every misstep is remembered." The raiders and ghouls slowly retreated, realizing their advance was futile. Wet crunches faded as claws and boots left the manipulated surfaces. Piper brushed dust from a leaning panel. "You didn't even touch them, and they're trapped." "Not trapped," he said. "A reminder. Metal listens. Men must remember as well." The wind carried the scent of oil, rust, and scorched metal. Dust swirled in lazy eddies, settling over twisted beams and bent girders. Codsworth hovered beside him. "Remarkable, sir. A lesson etched into every scrap of steel, every jagged car frame. Terrifying. Precise." He ran a gloved hand along a leaning pipe. "Presence suffices. Metal obeys reason. Men should too." Strong tapped a bent steel plate. "Strong like bones listen, strong safe." Piper exhaled slowly. "Even I'm afraid of what you can do sometimes." He said nothing, listening instead to the hum of metal, the scrape of girders, the settling of beams, and the hiss of wind across rusted surfaces. And in the silence that followed, the scrapyard itself seemed alive, obedient, scarred but patient, waiting for anyone foolish enough to test it again. "Let them remember," he murmured. Rust flakes drifted in arcs, debris settled. The wind carried his words across twisted steel and broken car frames. And he walked forward, leaving behind a yard alive with obedience. A silent warning etched into the bones of metal and dust. The scrapyard exhaled, waiting. The desert stretched endlessly, broken only by the skeletons of abandoned cars and the twisted frames of shattered houses. The sun hung low, casting a harsh ochre light that made the sands shimmer against the rusted metal strewn across the ground. Each step he took raised tiny clouds of dust, mingling with the faint scent of scorched oil and metallic tang that clung to the ruins. The wind whistled through broken window frames and hollowed-out walls, carrying the soft creak of loosened beams swaying gently. The horizon seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the desert itself had paused to listen. He walked at the front, boots pressing into brittle gravel and sand. Codsworth hovered just behind, thrusters sputtering nervously. "Sir, the settlement ahead is lightly defended, but the terrain offers no cover. We may be exposed," Codsworth said. "Exposure is irrelevant when metal obeys," he replied. "All that stands is mind to guide." Piper trailed close, notebook clutched, eyes scanning the open desert. "You always talk like the world bends for you. Do you ever just walk without commanding it?" Strong stomped a foot, sending sand and gravel flying. "Strong like bones, strong lead, strong makes safe." Danse raised his rifle, visor catching the last of the sun's glare. "Scouts report incoming raiders and feral ghouls. They're moving quickly across the dunes, probably hoping to catch us in open ground." He closed his eyes. The desert responded. Rusted fence posts trembled, half-buried car frames groaned faintly, and twisted girders embedded in the sand flexed. Every fragment of metal, every dented car door, every abandoned beam listened. Dust swirled gently as if the world itself was holding its breath. From a ridge, raiders emerged, guns glinting. Two ghouls slunk forward, claws scraping metal scraps with wet crunches. He raised a hand. A rusted car frame tilted subtly, blocking the first raider's path. A dangling chain lifted, looping around a ghoul's arm and pinning it against a steel post. A twisted fence post shifted under another raider, throwing him sideways. Strong bellowed. "Strong like teeth snap! Strong like metal bite!" Piper scribbled furiously. "You didn't even touch most of them, and they're already trapped." He stepped forward, boots crunching against sand and gravel. The vibrations ran up through buried beams and twisted girders. Rusted metal flexed, panels shifted, cables coiled, all responding without being touched. Another raider attempted to flank him. The sand beneath his feet shifted subtly, tilting him sideways. A rusted pipe looped around his wrist, pulling him gently to the ground. "Observe," he murmured. "Metal punishes only the careless. It rewards focus and respect." The ghouls advanced, claws scraping metal and sand, Wet crunches echoed as they slipped on shifting beams and warped pipes. A bent car door looped around one ghoul's leg, holding it in place without harm. Piper whispered, awed. "You're orchestrating the desert like it's alive." "Not control," he said. "Guidance. Metal remembers. Men should too." Above, the remnant of a collapsed sign swayed on its supports, scraping with a high-pitched squeal. The raiders froze. The ghouls hesitated, claws slipping on the bending metal beneath them. Codsworth hovered closer. "Sir, the precision of your influence. It is almost unnatural. Terrifying but effective." He lifted both hands, coaxing rusted beams, chains, and car doors into position. Dust and sand swirled around them in lazy arcs. He pressed a finger against a leaning fence post, tilting it to form a narrow corridor for his group while blocking the raiders. Danse exhaled slowly. "You've turned the open desert into a defensive structure without striking most of them." Strong stomped his fist. "Strong like teeth bite. Strong safe." He let his hands hover over the sand and metal, sensing every vibration from beams, girders, and debris. They twisted and coiled subtly. Rust flakes fell like red snow, settling on abandoned cars and broken beams. A raider charged, swinging a crowbar. A pipe swung into his path, knocking him sideways. Another tried to fire a gun, slipping on gravel and sand, caught by a coiled cable around his wrist. The ghouls flinched, claws scraping uselessly against bending steel. "Everything here," he said softly, "must learn to obey. Every scrap of metal, every movement, every misstep is remembered." The raiders and ghouls slowly retreated, realizing their advance was futile. Wet crunches faded as claws and boots left manipulated surfaces. Piper brushed dust from a leaning car hood. "You didn't even touch them, and they're trapped." "Not trapped," he said. "A reminder. Metal listens. Men must remember as well." The wind carried the scent of sand, rust, and scorched metal. Dust swirled in lazy eddies, settling over twisted beams and bent girders. Codsworth hovered at his side. "Remarkable, sir. The desert itself obeys your presence. Terrifying. Precise." He ran a gloved hand along a leaning post. "Presence suffices. Metal obeys reason. Men should too." Strong tapped a rusted car frame. "Strong like bones, listen. Strong safe." Piper exhaled slowly. I'm scared of what you can do sometimes." He said nothing, listening. The low hum of metal, the scrape of girders, the settling of beams, and the hiss of wind across rusted surfaces. And in the silence that followed, the desert itself seemed alive, obedient, scarred but patient, waiting for anyone foolish enough to test it again. "Let them remember," he murmured. Rust flakes and sand swirled in arcs. Debris settled. The wind carried his words across twisted steel and broken car frames. And he walked forward, leaving behind a desert alive with obedience, a silent warning etched into the bones of metal, sand, and dust. The ruined town lay beneath a dull, smog-laden sky. Collapsed rooftops leaned against one another, jagged and splintered. Rusted cars, their frames twisted beyond recognition, littered the streets. The wind carried the sharp tang of metal and ash, mixing with the faint, acrid scent of scorched plastic. Every step across the rubble-strewn asphalt sent a crunch of gravel and rust flakes into the air. Broken glass caught the faint light, glittering like tiny, fractured stars across the debris. He led the group down the main street, boots pressing into asphalt that cracked beneath them. Codsworth hovered close, thrusters flickering. "Sir, the town appears structurally unsound. Many buildings could collapse without warning," Codsworth said. "Then it must learn stability," he replied. "Metal obeys those who can guide it. Men must learn the same." Piper crouched behind a rusted storefront, notebook ready. "You treat every scrap of metal like it's listening. Don't you ever just move through a place without commanding it?" Strong stomped a fist against a twisted street lamp. "Strong like bones, strong lead, strong protect." Danse scanned the streets, rifle raised. "Multiple hostiles approaching, raiders and feral ghouls. They've likely noticed our presence and are converging quickly." He closed his eyes, feeling the vibration beneath his boots. Metal whispered. Rusted girders and collapsed walls groaned softly. Nails and bolts loosened, protesting under unseen strain. Bent car frames shivered. Every scrap of steel, every broken panel, every warped door listened. Dust and rust flakes swirled gently, caught in the light of the dim sun. From the far end of the street, raiders emerged, weapons raised. Two ghouls followed, claws scraping metal and debris with wet crunches. He raised a hand. A bent door lifted and leaned, blocking the nearest raider. A hanging chain coiled around a ghoul's arm, holding it against a rusted pipe. A twisted car frame shifted, tripping another raider. Strong roared, strong like teeth snap, strong like metal bite. Piper scribbled frantically. You didn't even touch most of them, and they're already trapped. He stepped forward, boots crunching over broken asphalt and scattered rubble. Vibrations ran through buried girders and bent posts. Metal flexed, shifted, and coiled, all without direct contact. Another raider tried to flank him, moving along a collapsed wall. The wall tilted subtly, forcing him to stumble. A dangling pipe looped around his wrist, pinning him lightly. Observe, he murmured. Metal punishes only the careless. It rewards attention and respect. The ghouls hissed, claws scraping steel and debris. Wet crunches echoed as they slipped on bent beams and leaning panels. A warped street lamp looped around one ghoul's leg, holding it without harming it. Piper whispered, awestruck, "You're turning the entire town into a living trap." "Not a trap," he said softly. "A lesson. Metal remembers. Men should too." From above, a collapsed sign creaked against a leaning wall, scraping metal on metal. The raiders froze, hesitation rooting them in place. The ghouls hissed, claws slipping on the shifting beams. Codsworth hovered closer. "Sir, your command over this environment, it is extraordinary, terrifying but effective." He lifted both hands, coaxing girders, beams, and hanging chains into position. Rust flakes and dust swirled in lazy arcs. He pressed a finger against a leaning wall, creating a narrow corridor for his group while blocking the raiders' advance. Danse exhaled slowly. "You've turned a ruined town into a defense without striking most of them." Strong slammed his fist against a car frame. "Strong like teeth bite. Strong safe." He let his hands hover over the streets, feeling every vibration from beams, girders, and broken cars. They bent and twisted subtly, rust flakes falling like red snow across the ground. A raider charged, swinging a crowbar. A pipe swung into his path, knocking him sideways. Another raised a gun, but slipped on the gravel-strewn asphalt, caught by a coiled cable around his wrist. The ghouls flinched, claws scraping ineffectively against bending metal. "Everything here," he said softly, "must learn to obey. Every scrap of metal, every movement, every misstep is remembered." The raiders and ghouls slowly retreated, realizing their advance was futile. Wet crunches faded as claws and boots left the manipulated surfaces. Piper brushed dust from a leaning beam. "You didn't even touch them, and they're trapped." "Not trapped," he said. "A reminder. Metal listens. Men must remember as well." The wind carried the scent of rust, oil, and scorched metal. Dust and rust swirled, settling over beams, girders, and wrecked vehicles. Codsworth hovered at his side. "Remarkable, sir. The town obeys without coercion, yet enforces order." He ran a gloved hand along a leaning girder. "Presence suffices. Metal obeys reason. Men should too." Strong tapped a bent streetlight. "Strong like bones listen. Strong safe." Piper exhaled slowly. "Even I'm scared of what you can do sometimes." He said nothing, listening instead to the low hum of metal, the scrape of beams, the settling of girders, and the hiss of wind across rusted surfaces. And in the silence that followed, the town seemed alive, obedient, scarred but patient, waiting for anyone foolish enough to challenge it again. "Let them remember," he murmured. Rust flakes drifted in arcs. Debris settled. The wind carried his words across twisted steel and broken buildings. And he walked forward, leaving behind a town alive with obedience, a silent warning etched into the bones of metal and dust. The horizon was silent, broken only by the jagged skeletons of skyscrapers half buried in sand. The fallout wasteland stretched endlessly, dust and ash drifting in the wind like slow-falling snow. The air smelled of scorched metal and decay, a metallic tang that clung to the tongue. Every step he took across the cracked concrete left a soft crunch as gravel, rust flakes, and twisted rebar shifted under his boots. He walked at the lead, eyes scanning the ruined city. Codsworth hovered beside him, thrusters jittering softly, wary of the unstable terrain. "Sir, the city appears largely abandoned, but there are reports of scattered hostiles in the area," Codsworth said, voice low. "Abandonment is irrelevant when metal remembers," he replied. "All that remains listens to those who command it." Piper followed behind, notebook clutched to her chest. "You move through this place like you own it. Do you ever just exist without bending it to your will?" Strong stomped up a heavy foot, sending dust swirling. "Strong like bones. Strong makes safe. Strong lead." Danse raised his rifle, visor catching the last weak light of the setting sun. Scouts report raiders and ghouls scattered throughout the city. They are wary but persistent, hoping to exploit any opening. He closed his eyes, feeling the city beneath him. Rusted girders hummed faintly. Collapsed rooftops shifted subtly. Nails and bolts loosened under invisible pressure. Beams groaned in recognition of his presence. Every fragment of metal, every twisted street lamp, every shattered car listened. Dust swirled in slow eddies as if the wasteland itself held its breath. From the far end of the street, raiders appeared, weapons raised. Behind them, two feral ghouls emerged, claws scraping rusted beams with wet crunches. He raised one hand. A bent streetlight tilted, blocking the nearest raider. A dangling chain coiled around a ghoul's arm, pinning it lightly to a broken vehicle frame. A rusted car hood shifted, tripping another raider and sending him sprawling across rubble. Strong bellowed, voice echoing off ruined walls. "Strong like teeth snap! Strong like metal bite!" Piper scribbled furiously. "You didn't even touch most of them, and they're trapped already." He stepped forward, boots crunching over gravel, rust flakes, and broken asphalt. The vibrations ran through buried girders and twisted beams. Metal flexed, cables coiled, debris shifted, all responding without direct contact. Another raider attempted to flank him along a collapsed wall. The metal beneath his feet tilted, throwing him sideways. A coiled pipe looped around his arm, holding him in place. "Observe," he murmured. "Metal punishes only the careless. It rewards focus and respect." The ghouls hissed, claws scraping steel and rubble. Wet crunches echoed as they slipped on shifting beams and tilted panels. A bent pipe looped around one ghoul's leg, holding it without crushing. Piper whispered, awestruck, "You're turning the entire city into a living thing under your control." "Not control," he said softly. "Guidance. Metal remembers. Men should too." From above, a collapsed sign creaked against a leaning wall, scraping metal on metal with a high-pitched wail. The raiders froze. The ghouls hissed, claws slipping as the metal beneath them shifted subtly. Codsworth hovered closer. "Sir, your command over this environment, it is extraordinary, terrifying, yet effective." He lifted both hands. Rusted beams, hanging chains, and twisted girders shifted into position. Dust and rust flakes swirled in lazy arcs. He pressed a finger against a leaning streetlight, adjusting it to create a narrow corridor for his group while closing off the raiders' approach. Danse exhaled slowly. "You've turned a ruined city into a fortress without striking most of them." Strong slammed his fist against a bent girder. "Strong like teeth bite. Strong safe." He let his hands hover over the streets, feeling every vibration from beams, girders, and debris. They twisted and flexed subtly. Rust fell like slow red snow, settling over abandoned vehicles and collapsed buildings. A raider charged, swinging a crowbar. A pipe swung into his path, knocking him sideways. Another tried to fire, slipping on gravel and broken asphalt, caught by a coiled cable around his wrist. The ghouls flinched, claws scraping uselessly against bending metal. "Everything here," he said softly, "must learn to obey. Every scrap of metal, every movement, every misstep is remembered." The raiders and ghouls slowly retreated, realizing the futility of their advance. Wet crunches faded as claws and boots left the manipulated surfaces. Piper brushed dust from a leaning girder. You didn't even touch them, and they're trapped." "Not trapped," he said. "A reminder. Metal listens. Men must remember as well." The wind carried the scent of rust, oil, and scorched metal. Dust swirled, settling over beams, girders, and wrecked vehicles. Codsworth hovered at his side. "Remarkable, sir. The city obeys without coercion, yet enforces order." He ran a gloved hand along a leaning beam. "Presence suffices. Metal obeys reason. Men should too." Strong tapped a bent streetlight. "Strong like bones, listen. Strong safe." Piper exhaled slowly. "Even I'm afraid of what you can do sometimes." He said nothing, listening instead to the low hum of metal, the scrape of beams, the settling of girders, and the hiss of wind across rusted surfaces. And in the silence that followed, the city itself seemed alive, obedient, scarred but patient, waiting for anyone foolish enough to challenge it again. He turned slowly, eyes sweeping the horizon. The dust swirled in arcs, the rust flakes settled on twisted steel, and the remnants of a city exhaled. "Let them remember," he murmured. The wind carried his words across the wasteland. Rusted beams and debris shifted slightly, as if acknowledging him. And he walked forward, leaving behind a city alive with obedience. A silent testament etched it into the bones of metal and dust. The wasteland stretched ahead, scarred but obedient, and he moved through it like a master through his orchestra, everything bending, shifting, and remembering under the weight of his presence.